Hello, and welcome to the second webinar in the XAware Technical Webinars and Basic Training series. My name is Darren Black, and I'll be the presenter for today's topic using the SQL BizComponent. The goal of today's webinar is to present the basic functionality of the SQL BizComponent by demonstrating how XAware can be used to select, insert, and update data contained in relational systems. We want to keep these sessions right at 30 minutes, so I'll ask your forgiveness up front if we go at a pace which may be a little faster than what I would normally present. The recorded version of today's webinar will soon be available on XAware.org so that you can review this webinar at your own pace. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. We are in XAware Designer, which is the design environment in which we'll create these services. Today using our SQL BizComponent. So I've created a XAware project over here, which was accomplished just by right-clicking and selecting New XA Designer Project, picking a location for that to be stored on my file system, and I've taken the liberty of creating a couple of other folders here that we'll need for the contents of today's presentation. So using the SQL BizComponent, we'll be going against relational data systems. I happen to have a hypersonic Java database running for today's examples. So I've got that started and running here, and we'll get right at it since we have limited time. So we assume in this series that you have some familiarity with the basic components of an XAware service like a BizDocument, BizComponent, and BizDriver that compose these services. If you don't have familiarity with those yet, I would encourage you to visit XAware.org to look at the tutorials that are available there so that you'll have a better understanding of what each of these are and more about how they work. So the first thing I'm going to do is to cover what we need to about the SQL BizComponent. We want to look at the basic CRUD operations, if you will, create, read, update, and delete. We'll go about that in kind of a condensed way today. The first thing I'll do is create one that will do the read, effectively a select, so that we can see the contents of our data source. So I'll click on the icon up here for a new BizDocument, and selecting the project that we want, I'll create a BizDocument called read. Click on Next. I'm going to start from scratch, so I don't have any XML that I'm going to associate with this up front. I'm just going to make it conform to my data source. So there we go. The first time that you bring this up, you'll probably see a default root element here of document. I've taken the liberty of updating it already to customer list, and we can enter in a description here. Select the list, select customers by last name. There we go. We've got an option down here to add a BizComponent call automatically to an element. I'm going to uncheck that this time. We'll do that a little bit later on in the presentation so that you can see how that works, but I want to get you familiar with the concepts and show you different ways of doing it now. So I'll go ahead and click on Finish, which will create our read BizDocument. At this point, we want to start creating a BizComponent. I'm going to expect a list back of customers, so I'm going to rename the element that it created for me here. I can do that by simply right-clicking and selecting Rename, and we'll just call it Customers. There we go. So now I'll get back a repeating list of customers, given that I have more than one. I'm going to come over here to start the process to my palette and select a BizComponent to show you how that works. I'll select the SQL BizComponent as we're going against relational systems, and I'll drop that right onto that customer's element. Select Drop On, and it launches us off into the wizard-driven process to create a SQL BizComponent. Now, there's a couple of things that I want to point out here. We'll create a new biz driver to connect us to this data source. I want to highlight a couple of things as we're looking at the SQL BizComponent. So if I pop open this folder here, this is my XAware installation directory. And to allow me to connect to my relational system, I'm going to need a JDBC driver. So I have dropped that jar file for Hypersonic into my XAware installation directory, Dynamic Jars folder. So you'll see here that I've got the Hypersonic connector in there, as well as the MySQL driver, in case I want to connect out to MySQL. For today's webinar, we'll, however, just be looking at the hypersonic. So by dropping your system's jar file into this dynamic jars folder here, you'll be able to make this next step happen right here in the wizard-driven process. So we're going to create a new biz driver for this example. I'll do that by putting a backslash up here. I could always browse to where I want that to be, but I'm used to doing it right here in the text window. So a backslash there, and I'll just call it customers since I'm going to connect over into my customers database. It's running here, again, the hypersonic database on my local system, highly secure, so I'm going to log on as system administrator with no password. And I've got my default protocol statement here that's going to connect me over there. Again, you can see a list of them that are available for you, things like Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL, DB2, all of the various different systems here. You can add these as well if your system's not shown here, and you can even go so far as to customize them all the way down to each data source. I like to leave them a little bit more generic like this so that I can type them in there and put in my information like localhost, and my database, I'll replace that with customers. And if I've done everything correctly, at this point when I click on next, it should connect us over into that system. That's good. No errors there means I've successfully connected into that database. And at this point, we're looking at step 2 in the process, which is the interface. I blew through it very quickly in that BizDocument wizard-driven process, but I mentioned that we were going to select a list of customers by last name. So I want to go ahead and create an input parameter here to do that, and I'll start typing last name. And since I've typed this more than once recently, it pops up here. I'll go ahead and finish it out just so that you can see what it looks like typing in. The first time that you enter it in, the default value will be blank and the description will be blank. Again, because I've done this several times in preparation for this session, that information has been pre-populated from the last time that I typed it in there. So a default type of string, again, you have all the different types there if you need to create a parameter of a different type. So there we go. We've got that in there. And a description of the BizComponent selects customers by last name. There we go. Clicking on next, I'm actually into the query builder statement, or query builder section of the wizard. The design view here, if I had a statement, a SQL statement that I had already written, maybe optimized for your system using a different tool, you could paste that right in here and move on to the next step. However, I'm going to show you how to use the graphical query builder here in Designer. So we've connected over in there. My request type is going to be a select, and I'll go ahead and add the customer table in there. And for this example as well, I'll add the customer type table in there, just to show you again how you would do things like a join between multiple tables. So anytime you get more than one table out here, you're definitely going to want to do a join. So I'm going to join on type to ID. Type is a number, and I would rather know that it's a business customer or a consumer rather than a 1 or a 2. So I've joined over here on that ID, and then I'll select the description from here, and then we'll select the rest of them here. Now I could double click each of these, or I'll just go ahead and do a shift click to select the entire range of them and add them in here. I want to create my where clause now, since I want to be able to select individual customers by last name. So I'm going to come in here, and in my criteria, I'm going to select like, and then my last name input parameter will show up here. I'll select that, and we'll go ahead and build that query. So all we've done is move from the design view over to the statement tab now that we've actually built a query. It's going to generate a prepared statement for us. And it looks good to me, so I'll go ahead and move on to the next step here. So what we've got over here on the left is the source, the columns that we just selected, and over here that customers element that I started the process of building this SQL BizComponent on. I'll show you a couple of different things here. If we had XML over here in the target, I could just simply drag and drop across to map these. Since I don't, I'll just go ahead and select my customers element here and click on the auto generate. And what that will do is create an element for me and then automatically map it. So to make this conform, I kind of have an idea of what I want my data to look like. And this would actually be a type. So I'll show you how you could edit that right here in this screen. So I'll come in here and click on edit. and then edit the XML in the text area here, and I'll go up and I'll change my XML to be, rather than description here, change that to be a type. There we go. And I'll click on OK, and you can see that the element name has now been changed to type, and the description up here has been updated as well. If I come over here and hover over any of these, I can do things like see where it's mapped. I can do a lot of different things here. I can do data manipulation if I want to right-click on any of these and apply a functoid. In the relational world, many times going from one system to another, you're going to have to do things like date timestamp manipulation, and that's very easy to do with functoids. We'll have a separate webinar coming up on functoids and how you can use those, but I want to make you aware that they're there for you to use at this point in time. I'll go ahead and click on Finish to go ahead and finish out this biz component and give it a name, Read, just for consistency here, so that I'll have a Read Biz document and a Read Biz component. And we see the biz component reference window. If I move this aside slightly, you'll see out there in the background our biz document where we started on that customer's element. What this is going to do is actually place the reference to the biz component that we just created on this element. So during that wizard-driven process, I created an input parameter called last name. It doesn't exist out here in my biz document. What I want to do is I want to check this box down here to say add that for me, please, and then I'll edit this input parameter and assign those two together. So by checking that box, I have that attribute here for me now, or that input parameter available as in the dropdown. I can also select any XML that's available to me anywhere higher in the hierarchy if I want to do that using the Path button. I'll go ahead and click OK there, and we'll finish this out. And there we go. I've got my read biz component. We can see the select statement here, the where clause that we'll be testing and using our last name input parameter, and down at the bottom our row template, how we actually map that data coming back, those rows coming back from our system. Let's go ahead and run this just to see what we've got out in our system. I'll save it, and now that we take a look at our biz document here, again, you'll see that it's created that input parameter for me called last name. And when we, in the biz component reference window there, when we assigned those two together, it created this attribute, passing that value down into the biz component where it will be used in that where statement, okay, that where clause. Let's go ahead and run this. So I'll come up here and execute it. And I know right now there shouldn't be any data out there in my database for last names beginning with B, so I'm going to change that over to A. We'll simulate a client making a request to us for this information. Click on OK, and what we should see down here in the execution results, looks like I've got two consumers here, or one consumer, one business customer. So Milton Auburn and Wendy Engelson here. Looks good. I can also do something here to make another test. In this example, I know I've got very few record sets out there, so I'll go ahead and run a query with just %. Give me everything that's out there in the database. Now, by default, we just added an option not too long ago into Designer that when you run a query like this, will prevent you from getting in too much trouble by limiting the result sets to 100. That can be configured in the preferences up here under Window, the size of the result sets that you want to bring back. But by default, that's set at 100 so that you don't launch off a query that would return millions of rows and make your DBAs really angry at you if you've got that much data. So I'll go ahead and run this one just so that we can see all the data that's out there in our database. We've got Allison Jackson there, and Cale Wilson, Wendy Engelson, Milton Auburn, and Craig Jones. So no customers starting with last names of B. So let's go on to the next step in this example here, and we'll actually create the insert update biz component, SQL biz component, to actually get some data out there for me into this database. So I'll go ahead and create another biz document here by clicking here on the toolbar, selecting the project, and we'll call this one insert update. There we go. Same process here. Won't associate any schemas at this point. We'll update our description. So insert or update a customer. I won't do the automated BizComponent call here yet again. We'll do that on the next BizComponent that we'll create. So I'll go ahead and click Finish here. And there we are in our insert update. Looks suspiciously like the first one that we created when we created our read to begin with. However, I'm going to make this one a little bit different. And what I've done is I've got an expectation of the data that I'm going to be receiving to insert into the system. So up here under the comment, I've got two files that I'll use for this portion of the webinar, the input data. And if I take a look at one of those files, we can see here I'm expecting a root element of customer list and then a list of customers underneath that. With the type of information here, I can take a look at that file. And essentially what I did is I just stripped all the values out of this and created the customer list, which contains the root element, and then the customer data, which is just the customer section. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this biz document and biz component look for that specific information. What I'm going to do is just right-click out here and insert XML before. I could do before or after, but I'm going to come down in here and I'm going to select that file that I want, which is my customer data. And there we go. I've inserted that XML right there into this biz document that I'm expecting to receive. I'll right-click on that element and delete it, and we're ready to go in the process now. Okay. Last time I drug across over here from the palette. This time I'll show you just by right-clicking on the element. I can select Make New Biz Component. I could also do a Control-Shift-M as a keyboard shortcut there. It'll pop up a list of available component wizards. So the SQL Biz Component, click on OK. This time we're in that wizard-driven interface for SQL Biz Component again, and this time we can use an existing biz driver. So I'll select that and browse for it. And now I can see it right out there, my customer's biz driver that we created during that last service that we created. And there we go. I've got all those values pre-populated for me in my existing biz driver, and we should just be able to press on. I'm not going to create any input parameters in this one because we're going to be receiving that data in as input data. We'll actually use that data itself in the where clause to determine a match, if you will, in the database. So this is going to insert or update a customer. There we go. And we're over into the query again. This time I'm going to change my request type to do an insert update. Of course, we could do each of them individually, create one to do an insert and an update. The insert update, excuse me, the insert update functionality will allow us to determine the existence of a row out there in our database and to match on that. And if it's there, we'll update it. If it's not, we'll insert it. I'll show you how that's done. I'll go ahead and add that customer table in there again and show you a shortcut that I like to use here because I can never remember how these mappings work. Go ahead and select all of those columns. And at this point, we would want to do a where clause to say where, if a row exists, update where. Normally you would have something like an identity, a sequence number, something that is going to more uniquely identify a row out there. I didn't go to all that trouble for my little hypersonic database in this example. So I'm just going to use a composite key of first name and last name to identify a record that I want to update. The problem is that I don't know how to map my inbound record over there from that data that I'm going to be getting in. So I'll show you how I like to do this. I'll go ahead and build a query for right now and then move on to the next step. It's going to throw a warning to me. Hey, you haven't provided a where clause for this statement yet. It's going to affect all rows potentially. Do you want to proceed? Yes. And I'm going to show you my shortcut. What I like to do is my source is now my inbound XML, and the columns are my target. So to get that value, what I want to do is I just want to drag first name over here. I'm going to create a composite key on first name and last name. But I can use this value right here, knowing that my last name is actually going to be last name, uppercase there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to double-click over here, and I'm going to do a Control-C to copy this value. That's referenced correctly as my inbound data, and then I'm going to move back in the wizard to step number 3. Now we're looking at the statement tab, but what I'll do is come back over to the design view, and change my criteria window here and say where it's equal to first name here. It's a string type, so I want to put a single tick around it. Control V, and then a single tick at the end. And then I'll do the same down here for my last name, equals, and I'll do single tick, Control V, and a single tick at the end. There we go. And I'm just going to change the value here to last. There we go. So now I've got my first name and last name. So it's going to look and say, does a record exist where first name equals my first name coming into me, and where last name is equal to that? If so, then I'll generate an update. If not, then I'll generate an insert statement. So let's build that query. And now I can see that where clause there. And as I move to the next step, it won't throw that warning to me because now we've actually got the query built correctly. Now, again, I could do the mapping exercise of dragging and dropping across over here like this, but I also have the auto map button here. And what that's going to do is look to see if any of them match, which in this example, they all match exactly. So if I click auto map, it's going to tell me what it's going to do. And when I click on yes, it maps them all for me, saving me that drag and drop action. Again, I can do any of the functoids here. I can hover over things and see what they're mapped to. Let's go ahead and finish this out since we're somewhat pressed for time. And I'll call my BizComponent insert update. There we go. And the BizComponent reference window comes up. Now, because I told it to expect some inbound data, this checkbox is checked now, include input path. And I could, deducing from what we saw in the mappings there, just change this right here to input and recognize that that's what I want, but I'll also show you how to derive that value using your actual inbound XML. Click on the path button here and then change the XML. Include that file that we created as a reference for what we're expecting, the customer list, and click on OK. And now I can see that XML that I'm actually going to pass in. I'm going to select the customers, and now you'll see that that path has been generated for me. I'll click on OK, and we verify the fact that our input path is going to come from our inbound data, and click on OK. Now, there's our insert update BizComponent. The default query here showing update, but you can also see down here in the operator that we have insert underscore update as our operator. So we'll verify. I'll show you a couple of different ways that we can verify what it's doing. We're going to use a combination of the log file and our readbiz our service or our biz document that we created earlier to verify this data that we're putting in there. So let's run it, and we're going to pass it that inbound data that it needs to successfully insert or update a record. The first time I'm going to run, I'm going to pass it the input data, and we see that file reference there. Clicking OK, we should see the results come back here and see that we inserted a record for Darren Jean Black and zip code 80918 here. I can verify what happened there again by going over to the log and rolling up a little bit into the log file. We should see the statement that was actually run there, the insert statement. I can verify the prepared statement that was generated there, insert into customer, and see the actual values that were substituted for that query, and that it did in fact insert one row. Now we can also go back and verify that that happened. We used to have, 5 records out there, none of them starting with B. So if I go back and I rerun my read biz document and I give it a value of B, go get me all records starting with B, we should now see that we have that one record out there for Darren Jean Black that we just inserted. Let's run our insert update again, and this time I'll pass it a little bit different data. What we're going to do is we're going to update my middle name to a middle initial, so that'll become G period, and we'll update the zip code to 80920. So let's run that again, and we'll pass it that other file, the update data. And there we go. We see an echo back of what it just did. So we see the G there, and the zip code has been updated as well. Now, how do we know what happened? Did it find that existing record out there and update it? Let's go look at our log file. And again, we can see right here very quickly at the bottom of the log file, updated one row, so that looks good to start with, but let's go look at the query as well. And we can verify the fact that it created an update query. and the data that it inserted into that prepared statement there. And just for fun, we will go back out and rerun our read biz document. Now, because we previously executed, I can see those execution results. What used to be there, Gene and 80919. And if I rerun it again, it will take that same default value that we used last time, all customers starting with a last name beginning with B, and we'll see that that data updates, and now we can see the current state of the data out there in the database. So that's good. We've done our insert update, we've done our read. Now we need to do the delete. Let's clean up the mess that we just made by inserting me out there into this data system. So I'll go ahead and create another biz document that's going to be our delete. Again, selecting the project, I'll call it delete, and go through the process again. Hopefully you're starting to get a little bit more familiar with, and we'll call this one delete a customer by last name. There we go. And this time I'll go ahead and check this box so that we can see this. Show you another tip that I like to do rather than the element. I'll call this rows affected or rows deleted. How about that? There we go. And what that'll do is return back to us the number of rows that were affected by this query. And by checking this box, it's going to add that BizComponent call. So it's a SQL BizComponent. Again, all the other BizComponents are there, but we're using the SQL BizComponent. And what it's going to do is just automatically launch the wizard that we've seen in the previous steps. Clicking Finish. Again, you'll see it created the biz document in the background and then automatically launched the wizard. So let's go ahead and use the existing biz driver that we created out there. Find that again, the customer's XDR. Data is populated there. And we'll create our input parameter here, last name again, and guess what? There it is. We don't have to retype it all again, but I do want to change my default rather than delete everything with B, which I'm the only one, so it wouldn't do that much damage. Let's just go make sure that our default is my last name so that it's only deleting that record for me. There we go. Deletes a customer. There we go. And next, our customer table out there. And I'm going to make it a delete, so changing my request type to delete. And I want to select, the only thing that I really need to select is that last name so that I can create my where clause down here is equal to our input parameter. You'll notice when I do the input parameter that it puts those single ticks around there automatically because it knows that we defined it as a string type. So you don't have to do that manually in these steps. Let's go ahead and build that query. And we'll see delete from customer where last name is equal to whatever value we pass it in. Next, and our columns here, we don't have any columns that we would return on that type of query, but what we can return is the number of rows affected. So I'm just going to map that over to rows deleted and finish. We'll call our BizComponent delete. And there we go, the BizComponent reference window again. And again, we want to pass that input parameter down into our component. So let's check that box to have it create it for us out here in our biz document. And we want to link those two together. So select it from the drop down here. And there we go, our delete biz component and our delete biz document composing the service, both of them together. Passing that last name down in there. So let's see what happens when we run this. Takes our default value, last name is going to be equal to black, and we should see that it has deleted one row. Looks good, and again we can verify that by running our read. The previous execution results there showed that we had a record for Darren Black. If we run it again, we'll see that there's no records out there anymore. So there you have it, the basic operations, selecting, inserting, updating, and deleting. I hope you found the content of today's webinar useful and would like to remind you that the recording of this session will be available on XAware.org. I'd also like to encourage you to visit XAware.org regularly to view previous recordings of webinars, tutorials that are out there, and to register for the next one in the series, which is scheduled for October 8, and will present data shredding, being able to take data, inbound data, and split it back out into multiple data sources. So look forward to that one. Should be out there soon. Again, thank you for your attention and time during today's webinar. Thank you very much.